Hello, beautiful ladies, and welcome to March's training for the Curated Collective. I am excited for this one. I always am. This one is on the art of feminine influence and negotiation. This has been coming up a fair bit with my clients. It's been coming up on social media, and it's been coming up here in this container too, in this hypermind. So when it comes to feminine influence and the art of negotiation, because they both go hand in hand, what we want to remember is that our feminine energy is our superpower, and it's what differentiates us. And so learning how to hone your feminine energy when it comes to influencing others, persuasion, negotiation, knowing your differences is really, really key. So the way that a woman influences versus a man is quite different. So the way that a man influences is normally through being very structured. It's normally through being very decisive. Normally, a man in a leadership role will say, this is the plan. Here's what we're doing. Let me know if you have questions, right? So it's very direct, very straightforward. And there's a real beauty to that. And I always suggest that women learn how to influence in a masculine way too, because there is a time and place for everything, especially when it comes to different people's personalities that you're dealing with. So we'll go through that later in this training. But masculine influence tends to be very focused on respect. Feminine influence tends to be very magnetic and intuitive. And so as a woman, feminine influence will feel easier for you. So instead of feeling like you have to puff out your chest and tell people what to do, instead you're focusing on emotional connection. You're focusing on soft power. So instead of pushing people, you pull, right? Instead of demanding, you're inviting people to do what it is that you want them to do. It's inspiring people over instructing them. So helping to see what others want and really sparking that desire in them. It's keeping things interesting, playful, a little bit unpredictable. It's really understanding body language and playing with that in a really good way. And it's surrendering. So trusting that when you're doing the inner work, people are going to be drawn to you anyway, and people are going to want to do what you want them to do anyway. And so we don't have to force people all the time. So because feminine influence is very much focused on emotional connection, the first thing I'm going to teach you is how to read others. And you can apply this in a business sense, and you can apply this in a just everyday life sense, in relationships that you have in everyday life. So there are many different ways to assess somebody, right? There's so many different personality styles. There is like the Myers-Briggs test, for example. There's many, but I'm going to give you the simplest, clearest one, because there's only 4 different types in this, and this is purely based on how they communicate. And so understanding these communication styles will help you to influence other people, because you can get into their head. And that's what we want to learn how to do. So the first communication style is analytical. So these are people that are very logical, precise, data-driven. So if you want somebody to do something, let's say it's your husband and he's an analytical type. He loves logic, data. He always wants to know, like, how do we get there? How do we do this? Where was the research from? Where did you hear that? That's how he operates. If you're wanting him to do something, let's say it's buying a new house, the way that you would communicate that is, here's a breakdown of the numbers, and here's what would happen if we move, right? So the house will go up by X amount over the next 10 years. Here's the safety ratings in the community. You want to be giving numbers and research as much as possible, because somebody who's highly analytical values that, right? So, and again, this is a feminine art of influence. A man just plays to authority, right? He's just like, this is what we're doing and that's it. But as a woman, we read people very well. We're highly intuitive. So that's analytical style. The next is a driver. So somebody who's a driver is very results oriented. They're very assertive. They're very ambitious. So when you're dealing with a driver, you want to be very concise, solution focused, and you want to focus on efficiency. So let's say that this is in a business sense, but again, you can think about a partner, a friend, whatever. this is in a business sense, and you're sitting down with a client, and they're clearly a driver, right? Like, and you'll know this because they'll talk about things like, how long will this take? Will this save me time? They tend to get straight to the point. They don't muck around, right? So if you're dealing with a client like that, and let's say you want to do a pitch, the way that you would handle that is to say, hello, nice to meet you. I want to save you time. I know you're a busy man. I'm going to get straight to the point. And then you give him just a high-level overview of everything. And you tell him, if you do this, you'll see results like this, and it will save you X amount of time. We're done. Do you have any questions, right? They'll value that and respect that because they can tell that you're saving them time. I'll go back to partner example. If you've got a partner that's a driver, and he's a very, very busy man, and he's constantly on the go and getting stuff done, and you are, let's say you're very emotional, you're very soft, you like to explain things, that's how you connect, you're a verbal processor, there's going to be a disconnect in your communication styles. So the way that you would get him on your side when there's something that you is to hold your tongue with how much you want to say, because it's not because you want something, right? You're wanting to influence him a certain way. So it's in your best interest to hold your tongue and not communicate how you normally would. Give him a high level overview. I want this, it costs X amount, or I want to go here. Here's why. Boom, 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 done. And then wait and let him make a decision. So when dealing with drivers, you want to focus on saving them time and being very, very efficient. All right, next we have an amiable personality type. So these are people that are really friendly, supportive, very relationship driven. You want to use warmth, empathy, and really focus on collaboration with people like this, right? So you know it if they really want to talk about how you're doing, they remember little details about your life. An amiable person is normally a really good friend as well. They want to chat, right? So if you're dealing with an amiable person and you're trying to influence them a certain way, you would focus on so let's say in a business sense, you would focus on, if we do this, it will make everything better for your team. If we do this, it'll help support everybody in X way. If you are dealing with a really amiable person in everyday life that you're wanting to influence a certain way, you want to focus on really building a rapport, and again, talking about what this will do for the broader community, right? What this will do for their family. You want to focus on connection and how whatever it is that you're suggesting will help others in a broader sense, because amiable people are very relationship driven. All right, and then lastly, and this one is going to sound manipulative, but it's the expressive personality type. Now, remember, you should understand manipulation in depth as a woman, because if you don't understand and study manipulation, then somebody else is manipulating you. Okay, this is very, very important. So let go of the fact that you might feel like this is manipulative. This is good for you and good for them, because expressive personality types understand this. Okay, so that's a caveat. So expressive personality types are really creative, they're very enthusiastic, they're very visionary, and they have a bit of an ego. And remember, every human being does. Nothing wrong with that. You want to use really engaging language. You want to be more expressive, and you want to stroke their ego a bit. And they like this. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's the same way, like let's say if somebody else figured out that you have an amiable personality type, and so they spent a bunch of time really getting to know you and talking about what this would do for people in your life, whatever it is that they're suggesting, you would still appreciate that, because they're thinking about you as a person and what your personality type is, and they're catering to you, right? And you still get to make the decision at the end of the day if what somebody else is suggesting is right. So same thing with expressive. So with expressive people, you want to stroke their ego a bit, compliment them, talk about how well they're doing at XYZ thing. If you have somebody really braggadocious in your life that like you love, but my God, they talk a lot about their success and this and that, then they might be an expressive personality type. So you want to stroke their ego a little bit when you're speaking to them. They enjoy it, and it helps you get what it is that you're wanting. So again, it's an art. Feminine influence is an art. So understanding these 4 personality types is important. So as a little bit of homework, because it's hard when you're just listening to somebody describe something to really have it click, I want you to look up analytical, driver, amiable, and expressive. Okay, those are the 4 personality types, and study them. This is incredibly helpful in business and in day-to-day life. When you understand how people communicate, you will understand so much better how to influence them. And I'll focus a little bit more on why influence is so important. When you have a big vision for your life, when you want to have an impact on this earth, let's say you are working with a charity, right? Part of influence is getting donations. You need to be able to influence people well to get donations to help the people that you're working with at that charity. So if you understand whether they are analytical, a driver, amiable, or expressive, you're going to better be able to influence them to do what it is that you want. So part of the inner work around influencing others and persuading others is understanding that when you're doing the inner work and you're approaching life with the best of intentions, you need to be able to influence others to get them to do what you want to do. Because everybody's being sold to all the time. And if you don't know how to sell to others, how to influence others, then somebody else is influencing and selling you. And you have to trust that you have good intentions, right? If you don't know these and you don't know how to influence others, then you're being persuaded in ways that you might not want to. Right? Because most of the time, the people that really study the art of persuasion, influence, sales, negotiation, these are people that don't necessarily have the best of intentions. So you want to know how to do these things so that you can have a bigger impact on this earth. It's important. All right, I'm going to focus on how to influence versus trying to convince somebody. So I'll give you an example of what this looks like. Let's say you sit down and you're having a coffee with a girlfriend and you say to her, "Oh my God, this coffee is amazing. You have to try it. You need to get this one." And she goes, "Oh, no, I'd rather stick to my latte." And you go, "No, you need to try this. I'm telling you, like, you need to order this," right? I've had girlfriends in my life that are like this before. I've had clients in business that are like this as well. They're so hell-bent on convincing that actually it's a turnoff. Actually, it makes you not want to do it. Now, think about if you sit down with a girlfriend and she says to you, or let's say you sit down with a girlfriend and she orders coffee and she goes, "Oh, this coffee was amazing last time. It was so delicious. Can I get this flavor?" And she looks at you and says, "What would you like?" How much more likely are you to say, like, "Oh, what did you like about that? That sounds interesting. You know what? Maybe I'll have one too," right? Human beings don't like to be openly sold to. Like, maybe that worked in the 80s, but now we are smarter, we're more emotionally intelligent, we have a lot more information that we have access to now. People don't like to be convinced. They want to be influenced, right? Why do we like to follow influencers? Why do we like to look at what they're doing day to day? And I should hope that you don't do that too often, because your time is important and your time is precious and you've got bigger things in life to do than just watch influencers. But nevertheless, all of us like to watch different influencers to some degree, right? Whether it's a certain kind of celebrity or an influencer on social media or even just a woman that built a business that you really admire. We like to watch their lives and it subtly influences us, right? This is why the 5 people that you spend the most time with have the biggest impact on how you operate, behave, your goals, everything. They have a huge influence. Your inner circle influences you. Because even if they're not telling you how to behave or what decisions to make, just being in their presence influences you. So when it comes to influencing somebody else, it is so much more feminine and magnetic to simply talk about what it is that you love with passion and let others make their own decisions. Because when you are a magnetic woman who's really sure of herself, you will be influencing others anyway. This also applies to friendships. And I've spoken about this before, with friends who, let's say, aren't on the same kind of self-development journey. And you'd really like them to be because you love them and you've been friends a long time. Let's say you've been friends for a decade and you'd really like them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get it together and start focusing on changing their lives, right? Being less of a victim, focusing on how beautiful life is, being more grateful, learning how to influence others positively, working towards their goals and dreams. Like, let's say you really desire that for the friendships that you have, and it's just not happening. You can either sit there and tell them all day long why they should be behaving this way, right? Trying to convince them, or you can simply embody the inner work so deeply and talk about it so openly that it influences them and they choose to do it, right? This is why feminine influence and persuasion is all about truly embodying goodness, kindness, yourself, your feminine energy, truly embodying the traits that you really admire and letting others make their own decisions about it. Because when you, and this is why there's a level of like detachment, dark feminine energy to this that's really good. When you are confident in yourself and truly love yourself, you don't spend time trying to convince people of things, right? You don't spend time over explaining yourself. You don't spend time trying to tell people how to live their lives. You simply live your own life, and your influence happens by osmosis. So that's influence versus convincing. Really, really important to know how to do as a woman. Another thing that helps with persuasion altogether, and you can apply this day to day or in a business sense, is learning the art of body language, really learning how to study nonverbal cues. So I suggest to every woman in my world that you spend time studying body language. There's different YouTube channels that you can do this with. There's books that you can read about this, but understanding body language is really important. So in psychology, if you're sitting across from somebody else and or you're standing across from somebody else and you notice that their toes, for example, are facing the other direction, it's likely because they're not very engaged in the conversation. If their toes aren't facing towards you, instead they're facing all the way to the left or the right, they're actually looking for an exit. So if you look down and you notice somebody doing that, you can let them go, right? You can say, oh, I really enjoyed speaking to you. Hopefully I'll catch you later tonight, right? Let's say it's at a party and they're standing, their toes are facing away from you, like, I'll catch you later tonight. I'm going to go get a drink. So letting people go if you notice there is not a vibe, if you notice there is not a connection, is important. And the best way to understand how to do that is to understand body language, because most people don't say, I'm not vibing with you, you're boring me, anything else. Instead, people give very subtle body language cues, and this helps you to preserve your energy and focus your energy where it matters, with the people that value you the most, because again, your time and energy are so precious, especially as a woman. We spin so many plates and our hormones take us for such a ride every month that our energy can be limited in some ways, and our time is precious. Our time and energy are so precious. So knowing when to let people go in conversations comes from knowing body language. If you want to know, let's say it's in a business sense, you're sitting across from a client and you're not sure if you're vibing, you're not sure if they're picking up what you're putting down, then you can reach up and scratch your cheek, or tuck a piece of hair behind your ear, or shift which leg is crossed from the left to the right. Because when you do this, if somebody else is feeling really connected with you, they'll accidentally mirror your body language. All right, now we're going to focus on negotiation, which is something that most women are never really taught how to do. And it's so important to learn, because being able to negotiate on your own behalf means you get more of what you want in life, and you deserve to have more of what you want in life, right? It means you won't get taken advantage of when you're buying a new car. It means you won't get taken advantage of when you're negotiating your salary or promotion at work. It means you won't get taken advantage of when you are entering into a new relationship. Everything is a negotiation to some degree. Just like everything, almost every interaction is us trying to influence human beings one way or another, and vice versa. It's other people trying to influence us. So knowing how to negotiate is really important. So I'm going to give you a formula that I go through I've got it in Lead Like a Queen. So if you want access to that, please let me know. But it goes more in depth, but I'll give you kind of a high level overview of how to negotiate the feminine way. So first is to question. The power of open curiosity is very, very strong. So if you haven't heard of Chris Voss, you should. So he's a former FBI hostage negotiator, and he used to spend all of his time negotiating with terrorists, basically, and really just not great people, right? So anybody who was taking a hostage, he would negotiate with to help get the hostages back. So he speaks a lot about the power of questioning questions make the other person feel like they're in control, but it allows you to guide the outcome. So this is like enchantress energy, right? You're not pushing, you're pulling. So in business, for example, an example of this is if you're negotiating, let's say, a rate, a margin, whatever it is that you want to get paid from a client, you would say, how do you propose restructure this, right? So like in recruitment, I often say, what are other agencies charging you right now? What structure do you propose? And by doing that, I can't tell you how many times I've had a client actually propose something better, meaning better for me, than what I was initially going to propose to them. So questioning means that you have the power and you have the information. Knowledge is power, right? Another thing you can say is like, what would make this a perfect solution for you? And then you just let them talk and talk and talk. In relationships, if you have, let's say, a partner who isn't helping around the house, instead of saying, you don't help me, you could say, how can you see us dividing these tasks up? Or what do you think is the best way for us to make sure we both get downtime together? Like, how do we do this, right? This is pure feminine influence, is asking questions instead of telling how to do it. With kids, instead of saying you need to clean your room, you could say, how do we make your space feel cozier? What's your plan for tidying up before dinner, right? Ask them questions. It gets them thinking. So instead of demanding and controlling, you're inviting solutions and you're having them use their brain power, right? Again, you're a busy woman. Your energy is so important and so precious. Let them use some of their energy. Why are you coming up with all the solutions? Let them do it, right? The next step of the formula is mirroring. So again, feminine energy is about connection, right? So when you're mirroring others, it very subtly builds trust. It helps others to feel comfortable. So in business, if you've got a client that speaks really fast and direct, you match their tempo. You make sure that you're more concise. That's exactly what I was talking about before with like a driver style of communication. Somebody who's a driver means you should be more concise. If they're really slow and thoughtful, you need to soften your approach and match their pace. So mirroring is really important with influence. And relationships, if a partner is really stressed and overwhelmed, mirroring their frustration won't help, right? This is why often in healthy relationships, if you're stressed out and being a pain in the ass, your partner is likely going to pick up the slack a little bit for you. And vice versa. If you're both having a stressful day, like sit back and think, okay, but is his day maybe more stressful today? Like, should I, and this is only in a healthy relationship, right? Not one where you're constantly taken advantage of. But if you've got a partner that's really overwhelmed, don't mirror their frustration. Like, pick up the slack until they've had a good night's sleep, and then they can pick up the slack tomorrow. In relationships, we all have different levels of energy and a different level that we're able to bring to the table every day. Sometimes he's going to be 80%, you'll be at 20%, and vice versa. And you just want to make sure that you are helping to pick up the slack instead of behaving exactly the same way. Another key to the power of mirroring is when you're having conversations, nod, repeat words, suddenly match their tone, and active listening is really key, right? Summarizing what they've said in a tone that mirrors theirs, right? So if somebody speaks to you for, let's say you've got a girlfriend that's venting and you don't want to be in a position where you're trying to rescue her, instead you just want her to talk. Let's say she vents to you for 5 minutes. She's had the most stressful day with the kids or at work or whatever else, and she's talking. At the end, you might say, oh, babe, that sounds so difficult. So it sounds like what happened today was X, Y, Z, and you're feeling really drained, yeah? And she'd be like, yes. And then she might speak for another minute, but that's all she needed from you, just to summarize, right? Just to mirror her energy and be there for her. So mirroring makes people to feel comfortable and safe and open instead of having resistance towards you. All right, the next step in the negotiation formula is empathy. And Chris Voss calls this tactical empathy. So holding space without absorbing stress. So you're not absorbing other people's emotions, but you're really, really acknowledging their experience, right? And you're guiding them towards solutions without losing your own sense of groundedness. So in Queen energy, right, we're commanding and compassionate, but we're not shrinking away from the situation. So in business, what this looks like is if you have a client that says we've got huge pressure to lower costs, instead of just acknowledging what they said and then pivoting away, if you're using tactical empathy, you might say, like, I hear you, budget constraints are tough. let's explore some ways that we can work through this together without compromising on quality. Right? So you said, I hear you, right? Or you might say, I hear you. I've got 3 other clients going through exactly the same thing. Here's what we did to help them, right? So you use an empathetic tone because as a nurturing being, you're feeling what they're talking about, right? You're not absorbing it. You're not going to carry it with you all day, but you're just like, I hear you, I feel you, I see you. And you're summarizing what they said, and then you're offering solutions. In relationships, if you have a partner that says, like, I'm so stressed with work, I can't handle anything else, instead of saying you don't have time for me, or like you always say that, or whatever else, you might say, like, I can see how much is on your plate. How can I support you without adding more pressure? And again, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, right, and you're with a man, asking him questions and allowing him to be the knight in shining armor and come up with a solution is really important, right? Like, why are you trying to solve everything all the time? Ask him questions, be empathetic, and help him to solve his own issues. With kids, if you have a child that says, like, I don't want to do homework, instead of reacting, you could say, I get that. Sometimes homework is really frustrating. What's one part of homework you can do that feels the easiest? I do this with my girls all the time. They've got 5 pieces of homework to do every week. And if they're feeling really frustrated one day, I'll say, you know what, let's just get the easiest one done. Right? Or, you know what, we'll sit down and do that together. I can see you're feeling really tired today. So I don't let them get away with not doing it, but I'm engaging in empathy so that they can see, like, I understand. Right? I was a kid once too. Not that kids can ever imagine that. So we're still going to get it done, but here's how we can do this to make it better. So staying rooted in your own energy, acknowledging their emotions, not taking them on as their own, but helping to guide them towards solutions is really important. The next step in negotiation is letting the other person commit first. So this is the art of holding power. So a true queen never overcommits first, right? She waits, she watches, and she allows the other person to show their hand first. So this is kind of like, if you're thinking about the different feminine archetypes, if you've studied this with me before, this is like mystic archetype energy, right? Leaning back and observing before moving. We don't just jump right in. We lean back and we observe. So I touched on this before, but like in a business sense, when a client says, what's your rate? What do you charge? You don't just blurt it out. Instead, you start with, like, what's your budget range? What were you envisioning for this investment? What if you paid for this service before? What is your CFO approved, right? So you start asking them questions, and that's the art of holding power, right? You're not overcommitting. You're not showing all of your cards, right? Do you want to be a mysterious, interesting woman or not? So you want to ask questions rather than just blurting out information. In relationships, if your partner says, where should we go on vacation? Instead of doing all the work, because again, honey, you're not here to be exhausted, you might say, like, what are you in the mood for? Are you in the mood for a relaxing holiday or an adventurous holiday, right? So you ask questions instead of overcommitting first. With kids, instead of saying you need to be in bed by 8, you might say, and this is depending on your child's personality, right? But you might say, like, what's a good bedtime so that you feel rested for tomorrow? I did this with my daughter the other day. Her teacher told me she was exhausted all day because she went and stayed up way too late. I sent her to bed and she stayed up giggling with her sister until 11 o'clock at night. I had no idea because I was downstairs. So the next day I said, okay, so if you went to bed at 11 o'clock last night and you're tired, what's a good bedtime for you tonight? And she was like, 8:30 now, I'm going to bed. And she went to bed. So the art of holding power is really letting other people commit first, right? Don't go all in. Don't give all the information. Let other people make a move first when you can, when it makes sense. So some final thoughts on influence, persuasion, magnetism, negotiation as a woman in her feminine power is true feminine power isn't about pushing, it's not about arguing, it's not about dominating, it's not about overpowering, it's not about telling people what to do, right? It's about inviting and guiding and creating space for the other person to align with you willingly. So if you could choose any mantra, I would have this as your mantra. So it's, I don't chase, I attract. I don't argue, I invite. I don't demand, I inspire. right? You are here to attract, invite, and inspire because you are a magnetic being. You're not here to tell other people what to do. So when you step into this energy, negotiation, persuasion, influence, they become effortless. And when you couple all of this knowledge, understanding body language, understanding other people, studying people, right? I want you to commit yourself to studying people and how they communicate, and body language, just psychology altogether. When you understand others, it is so much easier to negotiate and persuade and influence. So instead of having people deal with you, know you, negotiate with you, and feel like they walk away feeling like they've been overpowered, because again, everything in life is a negotiation to some degree. Instead of people walking away feeling like they were misunderstood and overpowered and they've stepped into something they didn't want to, when you really tap into your feminine energy, when you're influencing the feminine way, persuading the feminine way, people walk away feeling seen, heard, and like they got what they wanted to. They'll have no idea that you got exactly what you wanted, and maybe they could have had a better deal, right? So that's part of why you're here on this earth, right? Your presence is a blessing. Your presence is a present. So learning how to influence the feminine energy way has a positive impact on every single person that comes across you.